How's it going today, guys? Today we're bringing you a cool, fun new build with the Berserker in Chronicon. Now, basically what we're doing here is the opposite of what we did last video. We did a Fire Dragon Leap build. Well, now we're doing a Frost Roll build, and it does damage. It is crazy how much damage this thing puts out. Honestly, I think it is better than my Dragon Leap build. But with that being said, it's kind of a little clunkier to play. Now, I don't know if that's just because I spoiled myself in playing an amazing Leap build right off the hop and I can't get used to anything else. But I tell you what, this thing pushes hard and harder than the Leap build. Just right out of the gate with the new build, when I got set up, I was able to push Mythic 5 and 6. I don't know if that's good compared to y'all, but for me, it's a big improvement. Now, I will say the key thing with this build is it's not necessarily speed oriented like the Leap build, but I will say it does put out large amounts of damage, and it is a great contender for pushing. So now, with that being said, let's roll right into the items. So with this build, it synergizes around the 4-piece Gust of Frostworms set. The reason why is basically it's 2-piece Frostwinds have a 100% chance to trigger and Frostbite stacks infinitely. 3-piece Frostwinds now always triggers twisters 3 at a time, and at the maximum amount of active twisters is increased by 5. And then it's 4-piece for survivability reasons. Frostwinds adds 40% damage reduction to the Berserker when triggered. Effect lasts 5 seconds. So basically, since we're pumping out twisters left and right, proccing that Frostwinds, we are getting that 40% damage reduction while our twisters are out blowing away the enemies. And getting into the other items here, now you can get pretty flexible with the items. These are not the items, but I do believe these are pretty good items for pushing, and I haven't really seen a lot of other items that add this much survivability when you're pushing the higher mythics. The biggest one I feel like though is Storm Chasers. Damage is increased by 15% for each twister, gust, whirlwind, and similar type effect within 5 meters. Since we're popping out twisters left and right, we are getting that damage increase, and it is nice. Additionally, for going into survivability, the biggest item here is Frostborn Heirloom. Now, I'm going to go on the record in saying I think this is the best Berserker item in the game. Just because of how much survivability this adds to you. And granted, you're losing out on some damage because of rage release, but for survivability purposes, this is nuts. No longer deals damage and instead provides a protective barrier, shielding the Berserker for 1% of his maximum health for every 3 rage consumed. This just is nasty. You're getting a shield constantly up on yourself and you're able to survive. Otherwise, the next item here is Tiara's Bindings. Basically, put this on here for resistance to all elements score. Since we're pushing those higher mythics, we want to make sure we have our resistances up. That way we can take a hit. And then lastly, Frozen Anger, which 35 minimum rage and rage regeneration. That way we can just pump through our rage super quick and get our rage release, granting our shield on us pretty much constantly. Now, like I said before, this build can lend itself to variations depending on what you're doing. If you want a kind of a clear, fast clear, low mythic build, then swap out the amulet, get that rage release damage on instead of shielding, and then you can put a different ring on. That's something that gives good flat frost damage or has a cool effect on it. Same thing with your accessory. Otherwise, some additional optional items here I have is Rhyme Heart. Rhyme deals 60% increased damage and has 2 meters increased base range. So you could swap that out, put a little bit more damage on yourself if you don't necessarily need all those resistances like I do right now. Or you could do Nova, 5% chance to release a Frost Nova, dealing 95% frost damage when struck. Since we are rolling into packs and kind of staying in the packs a little bit longer, we're getting hit a lot more, so that Frost Nova could help. Or you can kind of take a different direction with this build. If you don't necessarily want to focus on the twisters, you can put on Drake Hoof, which Dragon Stomp, Earth Shatter, and Icicles deal 90% increased damage. So since we do have Icicles on this build already, you can put that in place and use that as your damage source instead of relying on the twisters. Or since this build also does a little bit of bleeding with internal hemorrhage, you could do Pain Grinder, which thorns and bleeds damage is increased by 107%. So there's a lot of variation workaround you could do with this build to kind of min-max it in whatever direction you want to put it towards. I don't think this is the end result of this build, best of the best. I think this is a great starting point for those who are looking to have a fun Berserker build and possibly don't want to necessarily break their eardrums listening to the Elite build. But that pretty much does it for the items here. Let's go ahead and jump into the skills. Now, the skills in this game are pretty straightforward, I feel like. It's pretty much just picking what tree you want to go into and dumping it pretty much everything in there. Similar to my Dragon Leap build with fire damage, I pretty much spec everything in Dragonkin. Since we're doing Frost, we're doing pretty much the same except in Frostborn. Now, starting off, we pretty much put points all the way into Warcry, Hardened, and Focused for cooldown reduction. We don't pick up a primary skill at all just because we don't need it. We spec all the way into Warcry, getting Renaissance, Inspire, and then down here for Focused, we go Rage Release and Anger Management. That way we lowers our maximum rage and get points into Rage Release as well. Next, we build into Crippling Cold, into Frostbite, Frost Winds, and Biting Winds. That way we get our twisters up and dealing damage as much as possible. Then we hop back up here, grab Glacier Roll into Chilled. We do not pick up Impact because we don't want to spread the group out or the mobs out. We want to try to keep them as clustered as possible. That way our tornado or twisters hit as many targets as they possibly can. Then up here we pick up Frostskin and Clear-Headed. And then lastly we go into Icicles, picking up Cool, Polar, and then picking up Chomp at the top with both Shattered Skin and Shattering Cold. And then lastly, we pick up Dragon Wing for speed and cooldown reduction. Now, basically, all these skills work pretty good together. The idea of this build is you roll into a pack with Glacier Roll, making sure you try to hit as much with your Icicles as possible, and then you're popping off Icicles and Chomp constantly while you're making sure your Dragon Wings are up. Same with Frostskin and Warcry for maximum damage output. Now, that's pretty much it for the Frost tree. Like I said, we pretty much spec everything except for the Impact and a primary here. Lastly, we dip into Skylord for movement speed. The reason why we're picking up movement speed there is to help out our Glacier Roll. So that means we basically just roll further, spawn more Icicles in. But that's the only thing we pick up in Skylord. Lastly, we dip into Guardian pretty heavily here. Because of our Frostborn skill tree with Razor Ice, Frost skills may also trigger internal hemorrhage from the Guardian skill tree. We want to make sure we spec into that internal hemorrhage to get more damage. So essentially, we spec into Brute Force and Endurance. Getting down to Brute Force though, we go into Inner Strength, picking up Quake and Internal Hemorrhage. And then we go back up here with Endurance, specking into Bide and Hunger for increased damage when the mobs are lower. So since we're rolling into mobs, we're applying chill effects, we're freezing them, and our twisters are slowly burning them down. I shouldn't say slowly. We want to make sure that once they hit that 20% health mark, that they instantly blow up with all our dots that we have on them. And since we spec it at internal hemorrhage, our internal hemorrhage is dealing more damage. And since bleeding is a physical skill, to my knowledge, I think it has a chance of causing Quake as well. So I don't know if the passive skills technically count there, but honestly with 3 points you can really just slap it anywhere you want. Now that pretty much does it for the skills here. Like I said, we're pretty much dropping everything into Frostborn, a little bit into Guardian, and a smidge into Skylord. Otherwise we'll jump on over to the mastery skills. Now, the mastery skills, again, I hate to say it, it's pretty simple. You can't go wrong here. We spec almost everything that we get right off the hop into Frostborn Mastery, picking up Frost damage because it's a must, then into Chilled Blood, Natural Cool, Dense Ice, Cold Heritage, which is great because since we're already using Frost Skin, it also gains the effect of Frost, which allows us to, when active in a slot, repeatedly slows all foes within 3 meters by 20% at minimum range. At maximum range, only half the slow amount is applied. Use increased frost damage by 30% for 7 seconds. So since we're constantly making sure that our frost skin is up, we are getting the benefit of frost as well, which increases our damage reduction by increasing our resistances and also increasing our flat damage as well, which is amazing. And then we go into Chill the North, increases our Frost Winds damage by 100%, into Winterborn, which for each active Frost Winds, Frost skills base damage is increased by 4%, meaning our roll and all their abilities are doing more damage. Then into Frostborn Focus, and then lastly, Frost Affinity. Now, that's pretty much the ones that I would recommend picking up. Like I said, play around with it, pick what you want to do. I think that's a great base to start off with. And then lastly, getting into more of the mastery, the class mastery ones, starting off here with 3. I pick up a little bit more mana, Magicka, Golden Touch, Calm Mind, Hardy, Fortress, Frost Damage again, because who doesn't want an additional 75% frost damage? Then lastly there, for bleed damage, since we are doing internal hemorrhage as well. And then hopping up to the second one, just doing a little bit more flat damage. It's not necessarily needed, but out of the other ones, might as well put it on there. We do Pickup Radius, Nimble, because we do not want to get slowed here. We want to do the slowing, we don't want to get slowed. And in line with that, we pick up Mobility to increase our base speed to, get from area to area when our roll is on cooldown, and also making our roll a little bit better as well. Then we go into Challenger, Bling, and then lastly, Resist All for now. Now, I do have 222 points in my mastery level, so I do have a lot of points to play with. If you're just starting off this build, getting into it, I would highly recommend just dumping everything into your Frostborn mastery tree, just because picking up a couple of these early ones isn't too crucial, maybe except for Golden Touch. Otherwise, that's pretty much it for the skills and mastery skills. Now, lastly, getting into how does this build work? Okay, now with the leap build, it's pretty straightforward. You're leaping, you're hitting 2 buttons outside of the one that you're constantly leaping on, and that's pretty much about it. Otherwise, this build, it's a little bit clunky in terms of what you're wanting to make sure you're doing. The biggest ones are keeping up your Dragon Wing. That's going to increase your base movement speed, attack speed doesn't really care about, and also reduces our cooldowns. And then along with that, you want to make sure you're keeping up Frostskin and Warcry as much as possible. Now, with that being said, the way you initiate a fight is you roll into a pack, you then use Icicles and Chomp, and you will keep rolling, rinsing, and repeating. You want to make sure you're rolling through the whole entire pack. That way your icicles that get left behind deal their damage. And also you want to make sure you're proccing your icicles and Chomp for just making sure you're just doing more damage on top of them as well. And that's pretty much about it. The hardest thing with this build is basically positioning. You want to watch out for ground effects and basically what pack you're going to be rolling into, because I have on many occasions rolled up into the wrong pack and immediately got my face kicked in. So with this, it's really that's where I find the challenging part here, is just because since you're playing with cooldowns, you want to make sure what you're rolling into, what you're rolling out of, and stuff like that. And that's where basically the entry level to this build is gonna show its true self once you start pushing into harder content. So you do have to kind of be on your game when you're playing this build, but like I said, since this lends to a lot of variations, drop it down to the difficulty, slap a whole bunch of damage items on, and watch you just enjoy one-shotting bosses. I can't say that enough. It is so fun watching like 5 twisters spin around a boss and just have them pop. It's delicious. Otherwise, that is it for me today. I hope you enjoy this build. Give it a shot, try it out. Let me know what you think could be a little bit different on it. Otherwise, hoping to come out with another build here, possibly, I don't know, I don't want to say anything, maybe bleed, maybe crit, I don't know, we'll see. Otherwise, let me know what you're playing. Are you playing the Berserker? What class you playing? What build you're rocking? And what difficulty are you finding the hardest to get past? Otherwise, that's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and catch you next time.